The camera sweeps across the iconic Jimmy Kimmel Live stage, the signature glow of neon lights casting elongated shadows across the polished floor. The studio audience buzzes with anticipation, laughter echoing off the walls as camera crews adjust their lenses. It is an ordinary night in Hollywood, or so it seems. But underneath the surface, something electric is brewing. Zendaya, the 27-year-old Emmy-winning actress known for her composure and grace, sits poised on the guest couch, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Across from her, Chris Evans, the beloved Marvel star whose charm often masks a meticulous intelligence, leans forward, a half-smile playing on his lips. The atmosphere is polite yet taut, a coiled spring of tension waiting for release. Jimmy Kimmel, the master of ceremonies, greets both with his signature blend of humor and warmth. Tonight, we've got a conversation that's going to spark some fireworks, he says, his voice carrying a knowing undertone. The audience chuckles, sensing the promise of something memorable. The cameras pan across Zendaya and Chris Evans, catching subtle glances, the kind only a trained eye might notice. A flicker of impatience, a restrained sigh, the ever-so-slight tightening of a jawline. Every micro-expression, every barely audible exhale contributes to the invisible tension in the room. The lights, the cameras, and the audience become part of the narrative. They are silent witnesses to an unfolding drama. As the segment begins, Jimmy sets the stage. We're talking about the pressures of Hollywood, the impact of social media, and the personal responsibility that comes with influence, he says. The conversation appears casual at first, a familiar exchange that feels safe. But within minutes, the tone shifts. Zendaya makes a pointed observation about how young actors are often scrutinized beyond reason, her voice calm but firm. Chris Evans counters with his perspective, defending the importance of accountability for public figures. Their words are measured, but the underlying tension is palpable, each phrase loaded with unspoken subtext. The audience watches, some leaning forward in their seats, anticipating the escalation. Social media amplifies everything. Zendaya says, her gaze unwavering. A single misstep can follow someone for their entire career. That pressure, it changes you. It forces you to perform, even when you're exhausted. The words are deliberate, almost poetic, carrying the weight of lived experience. Chris Evans nods, acknowledging the concern, but quickly adds, I understand that. But there's also the responsibility to set an example. When millions of people look up to you, you can't ignore the consequences of your actions. The exchange, though civil on the surface, carries a subtle edge. Observers note the quick back and forth, the sharpened timing of responses, and the nearly imperceptible tension building between two strong-willed personalities. Behind the cameras, production staff lean in, whispering to one another, aware that this segment is teetering on the edge of something extraordinary. A director's hand hovers over a control panel, ready to adjust cameras for dramatic effect, to capture every flicker of emotion that might erupt into spectacle. The audience reacts with quiet murmurs. A few chuckle nervously. Others lean forward, sensing the intensity. It is the kind of energy that can only happen when charisma, intellect, and stakes collide. There is no script for this moment. It is raw, unscripted, and brimming with the unpredictability that makes live television so magnetic. Even Jimmy, usually the anchor of calm and humor, senses the precarious balance. He attempts to interject with levity, a lighthearted comment about Hollywood pressures, but it barely registers. The undercurrent of tension has shifted the room's dynamics. As the debate intensifies, Zendaya's posture changes subtly. Her hands unclench. Her eyes narrow ever so slightly. She leans forward, commanding presence radiating from every line of her body. Chris Evans mirrors her shift, a silent acknowledgement that the conversation is no longer ordinary. Words take on a heavier weight, each sentence charged with meaning beyond the spoken. The exchange now resembles a duel, a dance of intellect and principle where neither party is willing to yield. Sometimes it feels like the world expects perfection. Zendaya continues, her voice measured but tinged with frustration. And when perfection isn't possible, the backlash is immediate, relentless. You think you're prepared, but you're never really ready. The camera cuts to Chris, who pauses before replying, his brows furrowed. I get that, I really do. But there's a line between empathy and accountability, and as someone with influence, I think we cross it at our own risk if we don't uphold it. At this point, the tension becomes almost cinematic. Audience members exchange glances, whispering, in disbelief, while the camera slowly pans over the set, capturing every reaction. A slow zoom on Jimmy Kimmel shows his practiced composure beginning to waver as he recognizes the escalation. Backstage monitors reveal assistants biting their lips, production staff frozen, unsure if intervention is needed. This is the perfect storm, a live broadcast teetering between entertainment and confrontation, where every movement, word, and pause becomes amplified. Then, the first real crack appears. Zendaya's voice rises just slightly, a subtle but unmistakable signal of frustration. The cadence of her words shifts, the tone sharper, more insistent. I'm not saying you don't understand, she says, but sometimes defending responsibility feels like dismissing lived experience. And that, she pauses, letting the weight of her words hang. That is exactly the tension we're talking about. The audience holds its breath. Chris Evans responds, equally firm, the conversation now teetering on the edge of argument. Jimmy attempts a segue, trying to inject humor, a question about upcoming projects, anything to diffuse the growing intensity. But it is too late. The emotional current has surged beyond casual control. Every camera angle, every microphone placement, every production cue is now a participant in the drama unfolding. The audience, sensing the stakes, leans in further, some recording on their phones, anticipating the moment that will inevitably be replayed across social media. Finally, the moment arrives. Zendaya rises from her chair, the smooth motion deliberate, commanding and resolute. Gasps ripple through the audience. Camera operators scramble to capture the shot, and Jimmy Kimmel's voice falters, mid-sentence, as he watches the Emmy-winning actress make her decision. The studio seems to collectively inhale. In that suspended heartbeat, the stakes crystallize. A celebrity storming off a live broadcast is not merely entertainment, it is a cultural event, a moment that will ignite conversation, headlines, and endless social media debate. The chapter closes on this image, Zendaya's determined exit, her posture unwavering, every step echoing the unspoken truths of the discussion that preceded it. Chris Evans sits frozen, a mix of surprise and contemplation crossing his features. Jimmy Kimmel leans back, a momentary flicker of uncertainty. In his eyes, the audience murmurs, some applauding, others bewildered. Outside the studio, the streets of Hollywood pulse with curiosity as viewers tune in via live streams, eager to witness the viral storm about to unfold. In these opening minutes, the documentary captures not only the clash between two Hollywood heavyweights, but the broader themes that define modern celebrity: pressure, expectation, scrutiny, and the delicate balance between authenticity and public performance. Every glance, every pause, every rising inflection tells a story. This is more than a talk show segment. It is a lens into the intense, often unforgiving world of fame, and the emotional realities that lie just beneath the surface of glamour. As the initial shock of Zendaya storming off the stage begins to settle in the minds of the audience, both in the studio and at home, it becomes clear that the intensity we witnessed was not a spontaneous eruption. Beneath the composed exteriors of Hollywood's brightest stars lies a landscape of carefully curated images, public expectations, and media scrutiny. To understand why this confrontation unfolded, we must rewind just a few minutes earlier back, to the moment when a seemingly casual conversation began to simmer, building invisible tension that would later erupt into one of the most talked about television moments of the year. The segment had been set up as a discussion about the pressures of Hollywood, the fine line between personal expression and public accountability, and the unrelenting gaze of social media. Both Zendaya and Chris Evans have spoken openly in past interviews about the challenges of fame. Zendaya on navigating a career under the microscope as a young woman in Hollywood. Chris Evans on balancing his blockbuster legacy with activism and public opinion. On paper, it was a conversation with endless potential for insight. In reality, the collision of their perspectives became inevitable. The debate begins cordially. Zendaya, articulate and deliberate, speaks about the psychological toll that public scrutiny can inflict. When every move you make is dissected online, she begins, her eyes steady. You start to second-guess every decision. You're performing constantly, even when the work is done, even when your intentions are pure. People forget that there's a person behind the headlines. Her words are measured, but carry an underlying urgency, a plea for empathy from an audience conditioned to analyze every gesture, every tweet, every post. Chris Evans, ever the measured counterpart, responds with equal clarity. I understand that pressure, absolutely, he says, leaning forward, his hands emphasizing his point. But public figures carry responsibility. You can't isolate yourself from the consequences of influence. There's accountability that comes with visibility, and it's not just a burden, it's a duty. His tone is calm but assertive, each word carefully weighed. The conversation, at first, appears balanced, but underneath the civility, subtle friction begins to emerge. This is the first pivot point. Two perspectives collide. Zendaya's focus on mental health and the individual experience clashes with Chris's insistence on societal responsibility. It is an ideological tension that few outside the industry can fully grasp, but the cameras catch every nuance. The narrowing of Zendaya's eyes, the slight stiffening of Chris's shoulders, the brief pause before he responds. These micro-reactions communicate volumes, signaling that the debate is no longer merely theoretical, it is personal, emotionally charged, and dangerously close to spilling over. The studio audience feels it immediately. A collective shift occurs. The murmurs grow, louder, some leaning forward as if drawn into a narrative they cannot control. Social media watchers, many live streaming the segment, begin to notice the subtle shifts in tone. Zendaya's clipped responses, Chris's deliberate counterpoints, Jimmy Kimmel's rare faltering in attempting to mediate. Each reaction becomes a cue, building suspense and tension. The energy in the room is no longer that of a routine celebrity interview. It has transformed into a cinematic tableau of conflict, human emotion, and power dynamics. As the discussion deepens, the conversation turns toward specific examples that have ignited public debate in the past. Social media controversies, viral incidents, and media misrepresentation. Zendaya references past interviews where her comments were taken out of context, scrutinized, and twisted into misleading headlines. It's exhausting, she admits, her voice tight but controlled. And it's not just the criticism, it's the constant judgment, the expectation that we should somehow always be perfect, flawless, untouched by error. Her words resonate with anyone who has ever felt misunderstood or misrepresented, drawing viewers into her lived reality. Chris Evans responds thoughtfully, attempting to frame his perspective without escalating tension. I see what you mean, he says, but the reality is that influence can't be divorced from responsibility. Your platform is powerful words, Actions, even silence, carry consequences. It's not about perfection. It's about accountability. His phrasing is deliberate, the cadence measured, but the underlying message challenges Zendaya's stance. What follows is a series of verbal exchanges where empathy meets principle, where emotion confronts ideology. The subtle friction intensifies. With each passing second off camera, the production team begins to recognize that this segment has reached a critical threshold. Whispered conversations in the control room, quick glances exchanged between producers, and the rapid adjustment of cameras indicate an acute awareness that something unprecedented is unfolding. Every microphone placement, every lighting cue, every cut is now part of the storytelling, contributing to the cinematic tension. The documentary captures these moments through slow pans of the control room, close-ups of tense expressions, and ambient audio of keyboards and quiet murmurs, a world behind the world where the drama is simultaneously produced and recorded. Viewers at home, particularly those following live tweets and commentary, begin to amplify the tension in real time. Short clips of the debate circulate almost immediately, overlaid with captions emphasizing the intensity of the exchange. Fans dissect word choice, tone, and body language. Some defend Zendaya's emotional honesty. Others praise Chris Evans's unwavering principle. The discussion evolves beyond the studio walls, highlighting the modern reality. Live televised debates are no longer contained. They are global, amplified, and endlessly dissected across digital platforms. It is here, in this charged atmosphere, that the true drama of the evening begins to crystallize. Zendaya, sensing the trajectory of the conversation, subtly shifts her posture, leaning forward as if to assert control over the narrative. Her voice, previously calm, now carries a sharper edge. "I'm not saying you're wrong, Chris, but this idea that responsibility trumps lived experience entirely, it diminishes the human side of everything we do. And it's the tension we're living with every day." The audience senses the crescendo approaching. Chris Evans responds with equal firmness, emphasizing that his stance is not dismissive, but principled. Jimmy Kimmel, sensing the growing heat, attempts to interject. With a humorous anecdote, a lighthearted comment about filming schedules and grueling press tours. The attempt is polite, but the tension has already eclipsed the intended comedic relief. A narrative has entered a new phase: unpredictability. The cameras linger on subtle exchanges, capturing clenched fists, narrowed eyes, and pauses heavy with implication. Every second is weighted, as if the studio itself has become a stage for a moral and emotional trial. The chapter reaches its climax when the conversation touches on the psychological strain of public scrutiny. Zendaya speaks candidly about the emotional toll of constant judgment, her words precise, her gaze unflinching. Chris Evans, understanding yet firm, pushes the point on the responsibility inherent in influence. The collision of empathy and accountability, the human and the principle, creates a tension that is both intellectual and deeply emotional. Every frame, every word, builds toward the inevitable breaking point that will later define this night. By the end of this chapter, viewers have not only seen a debate, they have felt it. They have witnessed the invisible friction of ideology and personal experience, the subtle choreography of words, body language, and emotional stakes. The stage is set, the tension palpable, and the audience is left anticipating the moment when restraint will give way to action. It is a perfect prelude to the storm that will define this historic live television moment, priming viewers for the dramatic unfolding in the next chapter. Zendaya's fateful decision to storm off the stage, the tension that had been simmering for the better part of the segment, suddenly reaches a boiling point. The studio air feels heavier, charged with anticipation. Every camera on the set seems to recognize the imminent eruption, capturing subtle shifts in posture, micro-expressions, and the tightness of clenched hands. Zendaya, who had until now maintained a poised and measured demeanor, subtly leans forward, her gaze locking onto Chris Evans. There's a quiet intensity in her eyes, one that speaks volumes. She is no longer negotiating the conversation with politeness. She is confronting it head-on. "You know, Chris," Zendaya begins, her voice calm but unmistakably sharp. "I've listened to your points, and I get the principle of accountability. But sometimes it feels like your concept of responsibility erases the human experience entirely. It dismisses the nuances of pressure, anxiety, and emotional labor. It's exhausting." Her words slice through the air with surgical precision. The studio audience leans forward in collective anticipation, sensing that this moment is the pivot upon which the entire conversation will turn. Chris Evans, ever the measured counterpart, responds with deliberate care. "Zendaya, I hear you. I really do. But influence comes with unavoidable responsibility. What we do on these platforms, what we say in interviews, it reaches millions of people. Ignoring that impact is not an option. The tension between empathy and principle, the emotional reality versus the moral argument, now hovers palpably in the room. Every subtle gesture, every micro-expression carries weight." Jimmy Kimmel attempts to regain control, his voice a tether to normalcy. Okay, let's pivot a little." He trails off, sensing that the situation is no longer just a debate. His usual charm and humor are swallowed by the palpable tension between his guests. The audience murmurs, sensing the shift from casual conversation to something far more consequential. Production assistants glance at each other nervously, the uncertainty radiating across the control room as camera operators readjust their angles. To capture every minute of the unfolding drama, Zendaya's hands unclench from her lap as she rises slightly in her seat. The deliberate motion is subtle but unmistakable. The audience gasps, whispering to one another, their energy surging like a current through the studio. The camera pans to Chris Evans, whose expression tightens, a mix of surprise and realization. Even Jimmy, seasoned in live television, falters mid-sentence, caught between maintaining composure and reacting to the unexpected escalation. The atmosphere is electric, a fragile line between performance and reality. Sometimes it's not just about influence. Zendaya continues, her tone escalating just enough to convey emotion without losing control. It's about respect, understanding, and acknowledging the human side of every action. That nuance, it's what people are missing. And if we can't see that, then we're failing ourselves and our audience. Her words reverberate, leaving a charged silence in their wake. The camera cuts to audience members holding their breath, some whispering to neighbors, others leaning in, hanging on every syllable. And then it happens. Zendaya rises fully from her chair. Emotion is deliberate, almost cinematic in its execution, her body language communicating a clear message. This conversation has reached its limit. Gasps ripple across the studio, audible and immediate. The audience, cameras, and crew all react in real time, the collective heartbeat of the studio accelerating. Jimmy Kimmel rises slightly from his own seat, attempting to mediate, his hands gesturing in a conciliatory manner. "Zendaya, wait," he begins, but the words falter as the moment crystallizes. Zendaya walks toward the stage exit, each step echoing with purpose. The slow motion effect, captured on multiple cameras, emphasizes the gravity of the act. The audience's shock is mirrored by social media, which is already buzzing in real time. Live stream viewers erupt in reactions across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, clips going viral within seconds. The world is watching a singular moment of personal conviction collide with the expectations of live television. Experts later describe this as a perfect storm of celebrity influence, human emotion, and modern media amplification. Chris Evans remains seated, visibly processing the event. His calm exterior masks an inner recognition of what has just transpired. He attempts to respond, but words fail to capture the magnitude of the act. Jimmy Kimmel, trained to manage live chaos, steps back momentarily, reassessing the segment. Behind the scenes, the production team scrambles. Camera feeds flicker. Assistants whisper urgently, and the director adjusts live shots to capture the full dramatic arc. It is, as one crew member would later describe, a controlled chaos that no one could have predicted. The documentary cuts to brief clips of social media reaction, highlighting the immediacy of the viral response. Fans are divided. Some praise Zendaya's courage, admiring her refusal to compromise personal integrity in a public forum. Others criticize the act as dramatic or excessive. News outlets begin to analyze body language, tone, and timing. Commentators describe the storm-off as a perfect intersection of celebrity culture and live broadcast unpredictability, emphasizing the moral and emotional stakes that make such moments so compelling to audiences. Worldwide, Zendaya's walk to the exit is interspersed with flashbacks to previous interviews, press conferences, and public appearances that contextualize her perspective. Viewers gain insight into why such a reaction was almost inevitable given years of scrutiny and high expectations. The camera lingers on her determined expression, her posture rigid yet graceful, conveying strength, integrity, and a subtle defiance. Chris Evans watches, his own demeanor reflecting the complexity of the interaction acknowledgement, surprise, and a silent contemplation of the broader implications. Backstage footage shows assistants rushing to prepare, the production team huddling to assess damage control, and Jimmy Kimmel adjusting his posture as he prepares to continue the segment. Every reaction adds layers to the narrative, emphasizing the human dimension of live television. Even minor gestures, an assistant biting her lip, a producer whispering instructions, a camera operator holding their breath, contribute to the cinematic tension. These details underscore the precariousness of live broadcasts, especially when powerful personalities are involved. As Zendaya exits, the audience erupts into applause, some nervous, some appreciative of the display of authenticity. Chris Evans, though momentarily stunned, responds with measured acknowledgement, nodding subtly toward the departing actress. Jimmy Kimmel regains composure, attempting to pivot the segment toward lighter topics, but the weight of what has occurred lingers. The cameras capture lingering reactions, audience members whispering, crew members exchanging glances, and the empty space left on the stage where Zendaya once sat. The chapter closes on a frozen moment, Zendaya halfway through the exit doorway. The studio bathed in a mix of stage lights and shadow, her figure framed dramatically. Chris Evans remains seated, a picture of restrained emotion, while Jimmy Kimmel's expression balances professionalism with incredulity. The audience's murmurs, the clatter of equipment, and the hum of studio lights combine into an almost symphonic representation of tension and drama. This is not merely a television segment, it is a masterclass in human emotion, celebrity dynamics, and the unpredictable thrill of live media. Within minutes of Zendaya's dramatic exit from Jimmy Kimmel Live, the event transcends the studio walls. The cameras that captured her storming off are now feeding into a global digital spectacle, amplified by the relentless immediacy of social media. Twitter explodes first, with the hashtag #ZENDAY, a storms off trending worldwide within the hour. Clips of the walkout are uploaded and reshared at lightning speed. Every pause, every glance, every measured step is dissected, commented on, and turned into a cultural touchstone in real time. It is a vivid demonstration of how live television and modern celebrity culture intersect, creating moments that are as viral as they are emotionally charged. From the outset, reactions are polarized. Millions of fans watch the footage with rapt attention. Some praise Zendaya's courage, lauding her for refusing to compromise her principles and for asserting Emotional integrity in a highly scrutinized public environment. Posts flood in. Zendaya is everything. Standing her ground on live TV? Iconic. Others take a critical stance, questioning whether her exit was excessive or theatrical. Come on, it's just a debate, one user tweets. She could have just calmly explained her point. The conversation quickly evolves into a larger debate about celebrity responsibility, emotional labor, and the pressures of fame, mirroring the very themes Zendaya had addressed on stage. Media outlets are quick to react. Entertainment news programs and online platforms begin compiling highlights, expert commentary, and analysis within hours. CNN, Variety, and The Hollywood Reporter post segmented breakdowns, framing Zendaya's exit as a cultural moment with implications far beyond the talk show stage. One headline reads, "Zendaya storms off Jimmy Kimmel Live," a moment that redefines celebrity authenticity, while another emphasizes the clash of ideologies between empathy and accountability. Chris Evans versus Zendaya, when influence meets emotional reality. Across the coverage, clips are annotated with slow-motion freeze frames, dramatic captions, and split-screen comparisons that dissect every reaction in minute detail. The documentary now turns its lens to the social media ecosystem itself, highlighting how fans, influencers, and digital commentators amplified the event in real time. Instagram stories replay the storm-off repeatedly. TikTok users create reaction videos dissecting facial expressions and body language, while YouTube channels publish commentary with millions of views within hours. The footage circulates across multiple platforms, often paired with text overlays and exaggerated captions emphasizing drama. Zendaya storms off live, or Chris Evans left speechless. These curated interpretations shape public perception, creating layers of narrative beyond what transpired in the studio itself. To further contextualize the viral response, the documentary incorporates expert analysis. Media strategist Alicia Fernandez explains, "In today's ecosystem, live broadcasts are essentially global events. When a celebrity acts out in such a visible way, it triggers a cascade across social platforms. Fans, critics, and casual viewers all engage, creating a feedback loop that amplifies the original moment exponentially." The commentary emphasizes the dual nature of these viral incidents. They are simultaneously personal expressions and public spectacles, where every emotion is magnified and every reaction becomes content. Audience reaction is further explored through user-generated content. Video snippets show fans watching the segment in cafes, living rooms, and on the street, eyes fixed on screens as the event unfolds. People are shown pausing mid-conversation, phones held close, mouths agape at Zendaya's decisive exit. Some recreate the walkout, mimicking gestures and playful homage, while others post commentary threads debating the moral and cultural implications. The documentary intersperses these clips with cinematic close-ups of phones, thumbs scrolling, and reactions in real time, emphasizing how intimately viewers engage with the drama. Social media also serves as a lens for generational commentary. Younger viewers, particularly Gen Z, identify with Zendaya's insistence on emotional honesty and personal boundaries. They celebrate her refusal to compromise authenticity under public scrutiny. Meanwhile, older audiences often focus on Chris Evans' perspective, praising the measured, principle-based approach and framing the exchange as a learning moment about responsibility. These generational lenses highlight how the same moment can be interpreted differently, creating layered discourse that extends beyond celebrity into broader societal conversations. Memes begin to proliferate almost immediately. Graphic designers overlay dramatic stills of Zendaya mid-step with captions exaggerating tension or humor. Animated GIFs loop her turning away, exaggerating the emotion for comedic effect. Even late-night talk shows reference the incident, using the footage as fodder for commentary and jokes, further cementing its place in the pop culture zeitgeist. Every reaction, whether earnest, humorous, or critical, contributes to the cultural footprint of the moment, making it impossible to separate the live event from its digital amplification.